As farming technologies became more complex and more productive, they eventually allowed the creation of larger, more populous and more complex societies, the societies we call agrarian civilizations. This transition seems to have happened first in Mesopotamia, in the lands south of the Fertile Crescent, and also at about the same time along the Nile Valley. In these regions, as villages spread and farming became more productive, eventually there appeared the first really large villages and then towns and cities. In the lands between the great rivers, the Tigris and Euphrates in Mesopotamia, irrigation systems emerged that produced huge crops and supported large populations. And then from about 5,000 years ago, there appeared in the south of Mesopotamia, in the region called Sumer, the first real cities. These had populations up to 50,000 people. They had walled gardens, they had fortifications around them, they had temples, they had palaces, and they had complex irrigation systems. We even have a map of one of them, Nippur. That map was carved in clay about 3,500 years ago. These were the most complex human societies that had ever existed so far. The real key to the creation of cities seems to be the tiny surpluses that peasant farmers produced, particularly as their farming became more productive. What this meant was that it was no longer necessary for everyone to be a farmer. Specialists began to appear, potters and merchants and priests and soldiers. And now something happened that was a bit like something that had happened already 500 or 600 million years earlier with the appearance of the first multi-celled organisms. Individuals got so dependent on each other that they began to need some sort of coordinating mechanism. So potters, for example, needed markets to sell their goods on. Soldiers needed governments that could hire their services. Merchants needed courts to settle disputes. Town dwellers and farmers needed someone to maintain the huge irrigation systems on which they depended. And everyone, frankly, needed someone to organize all of these increasingly complex relationships. As a result, in response to these needs, a class of power brokers appeared. Most of these were men. And what they did was they began to take on the role of coordinating society. In villages, they were probably chosen by those they led who needed someone to do this job. But as power brokers became more powerful and had more resources, eventually they began to hire paid enforcers who could impose their will by force. And now, for the first time, we have true states and true governments. And we also have something else. There has appeared a new type of food chain within human society. Farmers extract resources from the environment, from the biosphere. But above them, there's now a new layer of elite groups who extract resources from the farmers by the threat of force. So now societies develop a whole hierarchy. At the top, there's a small minority of people who are very rich and very powerful, who extract resources from the vast majority of peasants who may make up 90% of society. And in addition, there's always, we find, a small class of menials or slaves at the very bottom of the heap.